There are just some builds that are so straightforward and battle ready that you don't have to worry about anything else other than pick it up and play. And in this video, we're going to go over the Spirit of Assassin, Spirit of Wormhusk, aka the Spirit of the Assworm build. So let's get straight to it. All that being said, if you love to see more content like this on the channel for Destiny 2 and much more in the future, then be sure as always to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's get straight into the video. One of the beautiful components of build crafting is that less is more. And in this particular build, simplicity really is luxury here. And that's because we have two really great exotic perks, that being Spirit of the Assassin and Spirit of the Wormhusk. Now, the reason why I like this build a lot is that it really takes away a lot of the focus and attention from, let's say, things like aspects and your abilities, and really places a lot more emphasis on you trying to come up with a good build pertaining to weapons in your loadouts. And that's just because the Assassin Wormhusk combination is really good in that your finishers and powered melee final blows grant invisibility, so that right there covers you when it comes to things like Stylish Executioner. Now you can remove that and implement something else, while the Wormhusk gives you small health and a shield bump. So you could run things like Combination Blow to get even more healing, and then your dodging, since you'll always be dodging anyway, gives you a nice shield bump as well. So there's a lot of versatility you can do in terms of focusing more on your damage values, not necessarily so much in your aspects and fragments, but we'll get into that when the time comes. So the game plan of this is, again, really straightforward. It's just survive, right? Just use as much of your abilities as possible, most notably your class abilities. That way you can make use of the Assassin, be invisible, help your teammates out, help yourself out, and then along the way you can also dodge and receive some health as your reward. Now, this is also fantastic because it's not only just a tool you can use in PvE, but this can also be a PvP driven cloak as well for those who are into that. But for me personally, I do enjoy this more in PvE just because it is easier to just proc your Assassin right off the jump with just one punch to an enemy's brain. So that being said, we're going to jump right into the weapon category. We're going to talk about combinations and much more. Weapons do play the most integral role in any build, and that's just because that's where most of your damage comes from, and it's how you can deal with a lot of these enemies that try to make your life a living heck. Now, with the Assworm build, you're going to be in the ass of enemies a lot, so you want to have weapons that can really complement that particular playstyle and approach. Now, I've opted for things like the hand cannon and sidearm, as well as the sniper rifle, just because, again, I'm going to be up in the booty hole of a lot of the enemies, so having something that's close range is going to be nice, but then also having something far away like a sniper rifle can be really effective too to deal with. So, as far as elements are concerned though, I've opted for stasis and solar, and that's just because of the combination being really synergistic. Solar being able to provide that extra source of, ignition damage, while the stasis helps to slow things down, freeze targets, allowing you to rinse and repeat for a pretty straightforward approach. Also, Solar has received somewhat of a nice buff in regards to the Hunter's Journal, most notably in the area of ignitions, giving you more of that damage. So that's always nice. Plus, Solar Sniper Rifle's got a nice little buff, so every more reason to use Solar right now. Stasis is always going to be great, but Solar right now is pretty strong. So all that being said, as far as perks, because weapons themselves are always nice, but what perks do you want to be looking out for? Because we already have an understanding of what the build is about, remember we are playing the Assworm build, so we already have things like healing and invisibility attached to our core foundation. So you want to have perks that give you some form of utility and damage. So look out for things like, Headstone, Incandescent, of course. Heal Clip isn't going to be necessarily that imperative. It's up to you if you want to use it, but it's not necessarily important since we do have something covering us in the Wormhusk for heals. And then plus you could always throw in a few extra mods in there to keep yourself sustained. But things like Pugilist is always great. Swashbuckler, Kill Clip. These are really good options to use when it comes to dealing extra damage, since that's really where you want to place most of your focus now. The build is already covered in terms of your survival. Now you want to do more damage. So think about those particular perks when it comes to your weapon selection, and then add that to your recipe and see how that really works for you. So all that being said, let's jump into the next and final category, that being the overall build, aspects, and fragments. Here we are at the final chapter of the build itself, and so we're going to go over things like abilities, aspects, fragments, and why I've chosen these specific combinations, and then we're going to slowly close things out with mods and of course the Hunter's Journal. So this being the Assworm build, we already know we're going to be playing colonoscopy all day, so we want to be able to dig into that booty hole as much as we can with things like grapple and combination blow. All jokes aside, the main point is just to get in close and rinse and repeat. Make sure that you're always healing with your dodge, and of course you have the additional combination blow for the extra source of heals. Grappling is just great for engaging, disengaging, and then aspects are just fantastic here because in combination these two are really strong, Winter's Shroud and Gunpowder Gamble. Shroud being able to just slow enemies down, you pair that with things like Headstone, you can just really see the value in that, and then of course you just have Gunpowder Gamble for dealing with numerous adds, but also having the additional damage utility is fantastic, most notably due to the ignition buff that you get with the Hunter's Journal, which we'll get into. Now, fragments, all of these have been pretty much unchanged, and I think for good reason. As I've already mentioned in almost every single build guide that I've made thus far, faster protection you want to always have on, because when you are playing Dr. Ass, you want to be, you want to make sure you're protected wherever you go. You're going to be using your fist and you're going to be punching things a lot, so making sure you're always protected and resistant of damage is always nice. And then Facet of Ruin plays well into both the aspects, Winter's Shroud and Gunpowder Gamble, and that's just because you can make use of extra area of effect for your ignitions, but also you can make use of the damage and AoE blast of your Stasis Crystal, or at least shattering targets. Next you have Devotion, where you defeat targets afflicted with stasis or strand debuffs, and that gives you light transcendence. We are going to be using stasis a lot, as mentioned earlier. And then we have Facet of Courage, where our Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage. So things like our fists, we're going to be doing a lot more damage now, and on top of that we get more healing, so it's always nice. Facet of Purpose, really quintessential one here. You want to make sure you have this really all the time, and that's just because every time you pick up an Overpower, this gives you that respective buff, whether it's Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield. In this case, I've got the Tether, so I'll always be receiving an Overshield, which is not a bad trade-off, to be honest. I think having Tether is just perfect for any situation. This is great for weakening targets, gathering them together, and just dealing damage with you and your teammates. And then lastly, we have Facet of Awakening, where rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or solar funnel blows generates an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. Now, the reason why I love Awakening so much recently is just because a lot of these pickups are really vital when it comes to just having a nice, seamless experience. Fire Sprite gives you grenade energy, which is great because it builds back into your grapple. And you have things like your Tangle, which you can easily pick up by just grappling things and punching them in the face. And then you have your Stasis Shards as well. So all this together is just fantastic because it helps to just completely keep your build funneled. You're never having to worry about things running out. You'll always have access to your abilities, and that's why Awakening is always nice for that. Now, going into the mod, starting with the helmet, we have Kinetic Siphon, Solar Siphon, and Stasis Siphon. So I've gone with Kinetic just because there will be cases where I will swap off and go for something like a Kvostov or maybe Ace of Spades or whatever other kinetic option I feel the need to use. But the two most important here, of course, is Stasis and Solar, since these are going to be the two weapon classes that we'll be using a lot of as far as elements. Next, we have the gauntlets, and in this case we have heavy-handed and firepower. These both work in tandem together really well, and since again we're going to be playing, you know, in your booty hole for most of the time, having these options is always nice to get more orbs. And next we have the vest, or at least the chest armor, and I've opted for charged up, concussive, and melee damage resistance. Now, charged up is great because the more stacks I have of armor charge, the longer I'm able to utilize my weapon surges, which is going to be good since we want to be doing more damage alongside our build. And then, you know, these two are just straightforward, you know, concussive dampener and melee damage resistance is always nice. Then next we have the leg armor, and this is where things can really be swapped around depending on what you're really going after as far as the content. So in this case, I've opted to have all three respective surges that I tend to use often: solar, stasis, and kinetic. I'll sometimes go for double solar depending on what I'm looking for, or double stasis, but in the end it really comes down to what you're looking for. So this is a very selective section here, but I wanted to have all my bases covered as far as damage. And then lastly, as far as the Hunter Cloak, I have Reaper, Time Dilation, which decays the armor charge, and then Bomber, which reduces the grenade cooldown. So in the end, everything just tries to play into survival, and then really throwing that damage into weapons to make sure that we can get as much utility and damage output as possible. So as far as the Hunter's Journal, things have now changed, and I've added the new perks that have come with the additional, I think it was 5, right? Yeah, 5 that come with the Hunter's Journal now. So the only thing that I've changed is the anti-barrier sniper rifle, which of course is great now. I've also put on the solar fulmination, which I mentioned earlier pertains to ignitions, and this one is your ignitions do increased damage in an increased radius. So Gunpowder Gamble will really do well with this particular perk, so it's good to have. And then I also put Sniper's Meditation on, where Sniper Rifle hits grant stacking, Sniper Rifle damage, stability, and reload bonuses for a short time, and Heavy Ammo Sniper Rifle hits count as more than 1. So that I put as well. Now, there are plenty of other great options that you can use. As far as your sniper, you can go with the Incendiary rounds, where your Solar Sniper Rifle precision hits scorch targets. So if you really want to go that full-on solar route, you can do that. I didn't go for it. I haven't done enough testing yet, but as far as the solar option that I wanted to go for, the ignitions to me was the one that stood out, since Gunpowder Gamble can really make the best use for it. So in the end, this all comes down to how you want to build it. This is just the blueprint, so hopefully this blueprint will give you some inspiration and add your own little recipe mix in there. But all that being said, folks, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more on the channel, you always know what to do. Like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, new warriors, stay strong, keep fighting, and may the force be with you all, always. See you again very soon on the next episode of NuBuilds. Alrighty, take care. Peace.